All right, everybody, welcome back into Cherry Picking. Today's video, we're going to be looking at the Fantasy Hockey Weekend Preview for Week 3. So a little bit more of a balanced slate here, not 15 games on Saturday. There's about 8 games on Saturday and then 4 games on Sunday, including the Heritage Classic between the Oilers and the Flames on Sunday night, which should be an interesting one considering both teams are playing like absolute cat shit right now. But be sure to download the FanDuel Canada app before we get into this video so you can kind of follow along with what we're doing here. We're going to be going through each and every matchup. We're going to be talking about must starts, a couple must sits, some streamers, and then best bets. So the easiest way to make sure you're getting the right bets in is to download that app and follow along with us. That link is in the description. Let's get into this weekend's games. All right, so the first game on Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern, nice matinee game. We got the Ducks visiting the Philadelphia Flyers, two teams that are supposed to be at the bottom of each of their conferences, and they've actually been playing decent, I will say. The Ducks obviously just knocked off the Boston Bruins, coming back from 3-1 to win in overtime, thanks to Mason McTavish. And then the Flyers just absolutely killed the Minnesota Wild, winning 6-2, and been playing pretty solid as well. A couple good, solid wins throughout the first couple weeks of the season here. Also a close loss to the Vegas Golden Knights, but in this one, these are two teams that rank in the top 10 in expected goals against. So they're not creating a ton of offense. They're not allowing a ton of offense either. They're allowing a decent amount of scoring chances, I will say, so that expected goals number, take it with a grain of salt. The Ducks have been good at limiting quality scoring chances, I will say, and Philly's power or penalty kill has actually been very solid over the last couple games, and the Ducks more recently, power plays suck. I don't think they have a power play goal now in 3 straight games, and they had 5 opportunities against the Boston Bruins. But to see how well they're playing defensively is pretty reassuring, I guess, if you are a Ducks fan, because they played Boston twice and Columbus. I would say 2 pretty solid offensive teams there. So looking at some starts here, obviously Trevor Zegras has been a man on a mission this year. He's been shooting the puck way more than we've seen him before. I know he played on that line with Leo Carlsson the other night, and he was still shooting the puck a ton, so that's good to see. Looking at the Philadelphia Flyers side of things, I think Bobby Brink and Noah Cates could be some interesting streamer in this one. Both of them around 1%, 5% rostered, in that range right now, depending on what league you're looking at. But looking at their last 4 games, Bobby Brink has 3 points, Noah Cates has 2 points, and then their other line mate, Joel Farabee, has 4 points there. So, if this game does get out of control, which I don't really think it will, but Tortorella really rolls these lines relatively equally. So I think you can kind of get lucky if you do need a spot start there, starting Bobby Brink or Noah Cates there. Cam Atkinson, also a must start. The guy has 6 points his last 4 games. He's a man on a mission right now. Travis Konechny, Sean Couturier, all those guys, I think if they're on your team or even on your waiver wire and you need someone, those are definitely good options because it's a relatively decent matchup against this Anaheim Ducks team. And then one guy who looked to sit, Travis Sanheim, defenseman for the Philadelphia Flyers. I know he plays a lot, but he has a lot of points right now that are a little empty, I would say. His expected goals for number is really low. He's not playing with the rush a ton, and he's just not on the ice for a lot of quality scoring chances that are created there. So a couple FanDuel callouts here. I would definitely take a look at this under, considering how well both these teams have been playing defensively. I wouldn't say their goalies are terrible. Carter Hart's been pretty solid, and John Gibson, Lucas Dostal, both pretty solid options there. Bobby Brink, point and goal. I think that would be a good flyer to play if you want, especially his goal line. That'll be up for sure. That's probably going to be around plus 400 or something like that. So that's a fun one to play, obviously a little bit early on in the day. And then another good one, I've seen this market on FanDuel now. You could play a one player to score and then their team to win. So Trevor Zegras to score and then the Ducks to win, I think would be a good option here, considering Trevor Zegras didn't have a goal in that Boston Bruins game, but has been playing very solid offensively. So I think that price will probably be around plus 400 or plus 500. So those are the plays and the must starts for the Ducks versus Flyers. Okay, so the first game that we're going to be talking about in the night slate, 7 p.m. Eastern, the Red Wings visiting the Boston Bruins here. Detroit obviously had a really hot start, but I think we're starting to see they're a little bit fraudulent. I think that hot start was due to their first line being really, really good. And don't get me wrong, it's still really, really good. But against this Boston Bruins team, I don't know how much success they will have if they're relying on just one line. Jim Montgomery's a little bit smarter than that. But if you look at their numbers over the last 3 games, they're creating the 3rd fewest scoring chances per game, and then their bottom 7 and high danger chances created as well. So not creating as much offense as people might think. And then this Bruins team, not as good, I would say, defensively as we've seen in years past in terms of creating opportunities or allowing teams to create opportunities, but their goalies have been so good so far to start the year. Swayman just recently had a shutout. Allmark's also playing really well. I think his save percentage is somewhere north of 950 or something like that, or his goals against average is almost sub 2. I want to say maybe not after that Anaheim game, but still very good. If you look at their combined save percentage in 5-on-5 play over the last 3 games, it's .960. So that's second in the NHL right now. Very, very solid. So some starts here, I would say Matt Poitras. I've been talking about this guy a lot. He's just continuing to play more. He had another point against the Anaheim Ducks the other night. He has 4 points in his last 4 games played, and also his third in expected goals for in that same time frame as well. So that's really solid. JVR has also been playing pretty well. He's 19% rostered in a lot of leagues right now. I think he could be an interesting spot start against this Detroit team. I think they score a lot of goals against Detroit here. Husso has also been playing really well, so I feel like that will be this could be a game where we see him maybe take a little bit of a downturn. And then you're going to be starting, obviously, that whole first line on Detroit with DeBrincat, Larkin, and then Lucas Raymond. Lucas Raymond scored most recently in the game against the Jets where they did lose. But still, those 3 guys for sure. And then in terms of sits, Hampus Lindholm is a sit right now. He's just not doing anything in terms of filling the stat sheet. And David Perron, I know, had a much better week this week after obviously he was on my must drop like 2 weeks ago. But I still don't think, like, with the position he's playing in on this Detroit Red Wings roster, that he's worth a start at this point. I think there's much better options out there. So a couple call-outs for this game in terms of bets at FanDuel. I would look at Bruins money line for sure. I think that'll be probably one of my favorite plays on the Saturday slate. And then Matt Poitras point or goal. I'm going to continue to play that because the price is still relatively juicy for you there. Pasternak over shots on goal against the Red Wings. Last 5 games at home against Detroit, he's averaging 5 shots on goal. Some of them he's at 9 shots. Some of them he's at 7 shots. So I think that's definitely good. And he's still controlling a lot of this offense, or dictating a lot of this offense on this Boston Bruins team. All right, so the next game on the night slate, the Toronto Maple Leafs visiting the Nashville Predators. Joseph Woll has been playing outstanding for this Toronto Maple Leafs team. It seems like he's almost stolen the crease fully from Ilya Samsonov now, which is not that shocking. Woll has been a very highly touted prospect, a guy that absolutely dominated the AHL last year as well with the Marlies. But looking at both these teams recently, creating a lot of offense in 5-on-5, but not necessarily converting a ton of it, I would say right now. Obviously, Toronto scored 3 goals against the Dallas Stars, which is not an easy feat to complete, but still, they're just not converting at a higher rate that we'd see. Their high danger shooting percentage is actually relatively low, but I think that changes here. Both teams are top 10 in expected goals for. The one thing I think is interesting, Saros has started every single game for Nashville. Nashville has a couple of days off from their last game on Thursday, and I think maybe we see Kevin Lankinen start in this one, maybe get his first start. I'd be a little surprised if they do it against a team like the Leafs, but you never know, because Saros and Georgiev are the 2 goalies right now in the NHL that have started every single game. Every other team has given their backups a chance, even the Islanders with Semyon Varlamov, and then Jonathan Quick had a fucking shutout last night against the Edmonton Oilers, which was really surprising. So for starts here, all the usual suspects for the Leafs, obviously Matthews, Nylander, Marner, Tavares. You're going to want to start those guys. Bertuzzi has been solid, scored his first goal of the year against Dallas the other night. I think he could be a start again. Maybe he found something. If you need a spot start or a streamer at D, TJ Brody's actually been very solid in the offensive zone for this Toronto Maple Leafs team, has been a part of a lot of the rushes. Hasn't necessarily filled the stat sheet, but his expected goals for number is relatively high, so he's creating a lot of offense on his own, and then is also going to be getting a lot of residuals off playing with a lot of those really offensive guys like Matthews, Marner, and those type of lines. Kiefer Sherwood on the Nashville Predators has been pretty nice. He's filling in on that Tommy Novak, Luke Evangelista line and has been very solid. 3 points in his last 4 games played, and also a good streamer there. Probably the only streamer I'd consider on this Nashville team going up against Toronto. But you're going to be starting all that part of that first line again, Philip Forsberg, O'Reilly, and Juuso Parssinen even if you want. And then I might be sitting Tyson Barrie in this spot. He has not been the same offensive defenseman we've seen this year in years past. Going up against a Toronto team, I think there's better defensemen out there necessarily that you could be starting on Saturday or even Sunday. So consider sitting him. It's not like a must sit, but consider sitting him if you have better options out there. I don't think he's the best one. And some callouts at FanDuel to play some bets. 100% of me looking at this over, you might be surprising considering I just said that Woll has been playing so well and you say Saros on the other side, but regress to the mean here. Maybe Woll gives up a couple. The total should be set at around 6 for this one, or 6.5. Leafs money line I would take a stab at as well. I think this team is better suited for Nashville. to beat Nashville. And then, like I said, the shooting percentage has been a little bit down. And against this Nashville team, I feel like they could definitely find some cracks in this lineup. And then Ryan O'Reilly point, maybe a little bit of a revenge game. I feel like that will be a solid play. And playing alongside Philip Forsberg, he's been creating so much offense for that line, so I feel like that's a no-brainer. NHL same-game parlays are back on FanDuel this season. Offered in every single game, every single night. Unlike most books, you can include goals, points, and shots on goal. But the newest feature is the gift. Goal in the first 10 minutes. Looking at teams to target for the gift, here's the top 5 teams in goals per game last season. Here's a breakdown of goals in the first period from the 2021-22 season, as only 17% of games that season didn't have a goal in the first period. What will your NHL SGPs look like at FanDuel this season? Okay, so another game at 7 p.m., the Senators versus the Penguins. This should be a fun one. Two very good offensive teams and two very bad defensive teams, mainly because I would say the top 4 in both of these defensive units they're just very offensive. Obviously, you have Erik Karlsson, Chris Letang, and then you have Jake Sanderson, Shabbat, Jacob Chychrun. Artem Zub is out right now, I believe, as well. So filling in another role there, probably Travis Hamonic playing alongside Jake Sanderson, I would say. Another relatively, I wouldn't say stay-at-home defenseman. So that's given the reason why. So you're going to see probably a lot of odd man rushes, a lot of high danger, quality scoring chances for both teams here. So I think you could pretty much start everyone. I don't think there's really anyone you want to sit in this one. Jake Gensel is really starting to roll, so obviously I'd start him. I know he doesn't really scored a ton of goals yet, but I think this is maybe a game where he does. He has 10 goals in 13 games versus Ottawa throughout his career here. And then Brian Russ is also someone I'm going to be continuing to start. They made that change relatively early in the year, moving Raquel off that first line, moving him down to the Malkin line with Riley Smith, and then moving Brian Rust up with Sidney Crosby and Jake Gensel. So that's really reassuring to see if you are a Brian Rust owner or someone who picked him up relatively early. Josh Norris really bursted on the scene since coming back from his injury. I know a lot of people thought he might have been going on LTIR, but he's been really solid since coming back. 5 points, 3 goals in his last 4 games played. So that's really good. And then Jacob Chychrun on the back end again. I think, playing alongside Shabbat, he's been dictating a lot of offense. He had 9 shots on goal against the Islanders. So maybe one of those finally goes in against this Pittsburgh team who does allow a decent amount of scoring chances from opposing defensemen. So a couple call-outs here to bet at FanDuel. I would definitely take a look at the over here considering how these two teams play. I think this will be a very fast-paced game. And then Jake Gensel, anytime goal scorer. I mentioned his track record against the Ottawa Senators. Brady Tkachuk, too, has been creating a lot of offense and gotten a decent amount of assists, but hasn't been able to find twine recently. So I feel like a goal there will be good. No goal in his last 4 games. I feel like there's going to be a nice little positive regression there for Brady Tkachuk against a Pittsburgh team that definitely allows a lot of high scoring chances. All right, the last game of the night on Saturday, probably one of the best games of the night, or of the day, excuse me. Vegas against the LA Kings. They're traveling over to LA to play the Los Angeles Kings here. There's usually one game that has a ton of offense between these teams if you look at their history, but last year, each game actually had at least 6 goals. They split this series. Both teams won 2 games here. LA struggled to create quality offense against this team, but their shooting percentage stayed relatively high, especially in 5-on-5. It was always around 17 to 15% against the Vegas Golden Knights, which I thought was really interesting to see. But the LA has certainly shored up defensively, if you want to say, over the last couple of games. Last 3 games, LA leads the NHL in expected goals against in 5-on-5 play. So they're back to their defensive ways. Todd McClellan has certainly got back into his bag there. Some starts for this game. Kempe is really starting to get going here. 4 points his last 4 games. Leads the team over the last 3 in expected goals for as well. So he's definitely a start, a guy you can trust. Now I know he had a little bit of a slow start right out the gate, but don't fret anymore. And then Trevor Moore and PLD. 2 guys I'm going to continue to start and have a lot of faith in. And then along with Kevin Fiala as well, the assist man on this team, he'll be firing on all cylinders as well. Kopitar is starting to sling it too. Obviously 2 guys that play on 2 different lines, but play a very similar role. I know Fiala isn't necessarily a center, but he sets guys up, and that's what Kopitar does. Kopitar, 3 assists in the last 4 games. And then Shea Theodore has just been a problem for opposing teams. He has 5 points his last 4 games. Same with Will Karlsson as well, 5 points his last 4 games. So those are 2 guys I'm starting, along with Eichel, Marchessault, the usual suspects there on Vegas. And then a sit here, Ivan Barbashev, just really not doing anything on that top line, is pretty much just a passenger as Eichel and Marchessault get going on that first line. So some call-outs in this one. I'm actually going to be taking the Kings money line. I think they can kind of knock off Vegas here. I also like the under, and then Shea Theodore shots on goal and Kempe shots on goal as well are 2 player props I would look at FanDuel Canada. Okay, so the first game on Sunday at 1 p.m. along with the NFL kickoff. So I don't know how many people are going to be watching this, but in terms of fantasy hockey, very important game because it's going to instill a ton of offense, I would think. The Sabres, very inconsistent right now, and the Avalanche just suffered their first loss to the Pittsburgh Penguins. A game where they were honestly outplayed, I would say, for pretty much 60 minutes. They were playing really well, but Georgiev was also playing way too good. He led the NHL in goals saved above expected. I'm not sure he's still leading that category after his last 2 starts, but still, he was going to come down to earth, and that Pittsburgh game was there. So maybe he bounces back against a Buffalo team, like I said, has been relatively inconsistent and not driving the same amount of offense we've seen at the beginning or at last season all year. So some starts in this one. Ryan Johansson, man, this guy's been on a mission the last 4 games. 4 goals in the last 4 games played. He's only less than 30% roster in a lot of leagues. I feel like this would be a fantastic start. In this one, he's playing with Rantanen and Tatar now on that second line. A sneaky start for some residuals too. Thomas Tatar could be there. And then you look at the top 2 dogs on this Colorado team, obviously McKinnon and Rantanen, and what they've done against Buffalo throughout their careers. McKinnon, 9 goals, 21 points in 14 games played against Buffalo. Rantanen, 6 goals, 15 points in 11 games played versus Buffalo. So obviously you're going to be starting those guys and probably going to be looking at some player props on FanDuel if you were smart to make a little bit of dough. Lehkonen, you can continue starting playing along with Nichushkin, playing on that first line with Nate. No problem there. I also like Bowen Byram in this one. He's been showing some flashes offensively that I'd really like to see. Obviously, you're going to be starting Cale Makar and Devin Taves, but I think Bowen Byram, a lot of people are going to have questions about him just from his start. I think he's definitely worth a start at this point. Alex Tuch is someone you can now confidently start, I would say. Obviously, had a little bit of a slow start, but scored recently. I believe he scored his first goal of the season against Ottawa. And I think he's starting to look a lot better than he was at the beginning of the season. Owen Power, Tage Thompson, Skinner, Cousins, and Dahlin. Dahlin just racking up the assists every single night, which is awesome to see. Don't really have any sits for this one, I would say. I would just be looking at the top 6 for Colorado, top 6 for Buffalo, and same on the defensive side. And then a call out here, Avs money line, 100%. Probably the one of the few bets I'm going to be playing on Sunday. And then Ryan Johansson pointer goal is definitely something I'm going to be looking at. And then try to find some creative way to play McKinnon and Rantanen. Obviously, a lot of their player props on FanDuel are going to be relatively juiced. Obviously, not very favorable odds because they're very good players. But there's a way you can parlay. You could same game parlay in this game. Maybe a couple shots for both of them, and then an Avs win could get you a nice plus money play. So that's it for Avalanche and the Sabres. All right, this last game, really interesting one, the Heritage Classic. You have 2 Flames and Oilers team who I believe have lost 3 straight. All 3 of these teams, maybe even 4 straight, and teams that a lot of people had high hopes for that have just not really delivered. The Edmonton Oilers being obviously the biggest cause for concern if you're an Oilers fan, considering they're supposed to probably win the Western Conference or be a top 3 team in the Western Conference, and they simply aren't right now. Connor McDavid's out, so cut them a little bit of slack, but they need to be able to do stuff without Connor McDavid. One guy who has been taking advantage of that, Evander Kane, he had a pretty solid game against the Minnesota Wild in that one. I believe he finished with 2 points earlier this week. So with McDavid out, Evander Kane on the power play, definitely a guy you should be looking at. On the Flames side of things, I don't know who you should trust at this point. I like what Mikael Backlund's been doing. One of those top guys right now in terms of creating his own opportunities, especially off the rush. Shots off the rush is something he does really well. He's really fast forward on that Calgary Flames team. Huberdeau just started off decently well and has really slowed down. Same with Elias Lindholm. Nazem Kadri doesn't have a goal yet. But watch, this is going to be the game, the Heritage Classic, that these 2 teams just absolutely explode for goals, at least the Calgary Flames. Not that hard when you're going up against either Jack Campbell or Stuart Skinner on the Oilers side of things. And for the Flames, Jacob Markstrom, still not, I'd say he's a relatively mediocre goalie at this point. He proved it last year. He was pretty bad. And this year he's been super average, probably below average if you want to say that. So I'm going to be starting a lot of guys in this game. I just think you kind of have to with how these 2 teams are playing. They can't continue to play this shit. And obviously one team has to win here. So I'm going to be looking at starting Huberdeau, Backlund, Blake Coleman. Lindholm could be if you need a center, but there could be easier centers to start on this Sunday. And then Oilers as well. Obviously Draisaitl, Evander Kane, Evan Bouchard, Darnell Nurse, Just the usual suspects there. And a bet in this one, I think I'm just going to roll with the over. I'm not picking a side. I don't know who's going to win this game. I honestly have no idea. But I think there's going to be a lot of goals, and I like that for this game. So the over in that one, and then you have some must-starts and streamers in this game too. All right, guys, thank you for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of the Fantasy Hockey Weekend Preview for Week 3. Some must-starts, some streamers, and some best bets for Saturday and Sunday that you can place at FanDuel Canada. Be sure to download that app. That link will be in the description. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week.